Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining this short live stream where we'll be able to give you a little preview on what's coming for Capture One for iPad, most importantly for tethering. As you know, when we announced Capture One for iPad, it came with the feature set that you see today if you're a Capture One for iPad user. One of the most popular requests that we have had, of course, is to add the functionality of tethering. Now, at the time of everyone asking, we weren't entirely sure when we would be able to deliver that. I'd been using early alpha version actually for quite some time, but there were still quite a few kinks to iron out to get the reliability up to snuff and all those kinds of things. But fortunately, it's all come together quite nice and quickly. And that's the whole purpose of today, is to give you an insight of how it works on the iPad, what's available now and what potentially could be available in the future as well. So let's go over to the iPad. As you can see, just my setup. I've got my iPad here. I'm transmitting the screen wirelessly, obviously, because I need the connection to be able to connect the camera in a second. So the screen quality that you see on the screen share, it's okay, but it's not perfect. It comes out a little bit dense, like it's a little bit too contrasty. So just keep that in mind when we go through and look at some sample photos. I've got over my shoulder, if you can see, just a cliched setup or vintage cameras, because that's the kind of thing that we always shoot. And then I'm going to hook up a Sony a7R4, which is what I've got sitting to my right. It's just out of shot, and essentially show you the workflow. So let's grab a cable without further ado. So I've got a standard USB-C cable, as you can see here. So let's just hook this into the side of the iPad. And then it helps if we also turn the camera on. That's also a good start. Then what you'll see is under cameras, you can see it's its technical model name that Sony calls things. So the ILCE 7RM4A. So in layman's terms, the Sony A7R Mark IV. Now this is a 60 megapixel camera. I picked this, well, first of all, it's because it's the camera I have to hand, and also because it's also quite beefy megapixel wise, so that will give you an idea of transfer speed on heavier files. There's no raw compression available, or there is, but it's a lossy compression, so I'm shooting at the lossless maximum file size as well, and I can show you how big the files are. So we can see the camera down here, like so. Then all I need to do now, if I just take a picture, let me just focus and hit the button. So we can take a shot. I've got no idea what the exposure is like. And then you see the picture pop up like so. By default, it goes into all captures. So you can see here over on the top left, that's an additional collection, or one of these fixed collections that belongs up in the top left, so we can see all captures. So if I just take another shot for a second, we go and look in the main display in one moment. So if I just double tap on this one, then you can see the picture come up like so. If I shoot another one, and we get into the bigger things for the workflow in a minute, you can roughly see the speed of what it's coming up. And you can see that's a 122.9 megapixel file. JD, I saw your question down here. I will answer a couple of compatibility things once we've gone through the workflow, and then we can talk about which cameras work, which cameras don't, what we're going on in the background as well. So let's go back to the gallery view like so. So those photos, all captures, when you're shooting tethered into the iPad, then they will by default go into that collection of pictures. You'll also see them in the all images collection like so at the top. Now if you want to, which is what I imagine most of you will want to do, is to set up a dedicated capture album. So we can do that. So down here in the bottom left, we've got our albums. I'm going to make a new album. So let's just call this capture. Can be anything, of course. Create that. And then if I tap on the three dots next to it, you can see right down here at the bottom, assign as capture album. So if I do that, then you can see the little camera icon sit next to that as well. So now when I take another picture, let's pop that. You can now see capture says 1, and then we're straight away into my tethered section, essentially. Pretty much that gives you the idea of the workflow, but there's one more little important thing which we weren't sure we could sneak in. Let me just take another shot, and I'm just going to slide into view a grey card and whoops, knock the camera off its tripod and do another shot. So we've got our grey card in there, so let's bring up white balance. Let's grab our color picker, which is over here. It's just hiding under the screen, but I'm going to drop the color picker on there and pay attention down here in the bottom right hand corner. So you see there's a new icon. So in this stack of, hang on, let's just bring this up bigger. So in this stack of 4 icons down the bottom, like so, you can see these. The top one is a new icon which has just been added. So this turns on and you can see the method apply adjustments to next capture. So next capture adjustments like you're used to if you're a Capture One Pro user. So that will make sure the adjustments that you've just applied, let's pull this one away for now and take another picture, will carry over to the next picture. So that those values of 3072 Kelvin minus 5.4 tint automatically carried over. And if I was to adjust anything else, so let's make it a bit brighter. Let's pull down those highlights for a second and open up the shadows a touch. So any of those adjustments that I'm making now, if I now do another capture like so, then that's automatically carried over until I would turn that function off. But you know when next capture adjustments is working because that icon remains lit like so. Okay, Victor says, hi Victor, can you take some photos quickly so we can see the transfer speed? Sure, that's a good idea. It's 1/3 of a second exposure at the moment, so it's not going to be super speedy because obviously we need to catch up. But if I fire off a volley, hopefully you can hear the camera firing in the background. So I'm shooting as many as I can, like so. Then you can see it's keeping up. And remember, keep in mind that these are big files as well. That's 122.9 megabytes. So if we were shooting with let's pick another camera I know, like a Sony A7, not the A7R, just the A7, the file size would be 1/3 of that pretty much. So you can also expect the transfer speed to be a bit chunky as well. Okay, so talking about some compatibility things, you've noticed that I've been shooting from the camera. So currently you'll notice an absence of various different camera controls. That's not to say that they won't come, but there is potential that we could add shutter speed, aperture, ISO, shutter release and so on. What we might try and do is stick up a poll on YouTube once we've got through a few other questions as well, and you could vote, if you like, for a priority of those kinds of things. We imagine if you're using the iPad in this kind of tethered situation, you're going to be relatively close quarters and operating the camera. It's, I guess, less likely that you would use it in a product setup like this, because in the studio you're more likely to tether to Capture One Pro. That would make more sense. But out in the field on a lighter weight kind of situation, then generally I would assume you'd be operating the camera most of the time. But prove me wrong in the comments if that's not right. Okay, let's go back through some of the questions. So David says, can you save to an internal memory card and to the iPad when tethering? Not currently, but it is something that we're looking at. So at the moment, no, it goes straight to the memory on the iPad. That's a good question from Will. I don't know the answer for that actually, Will. Will Capture One for iPad take advantage of reference mode in iOS 16? For those of you who don't know what that is, that's some additional technology which will improve the color management of a piece of equipment like the iPad, but it's a little bit too early to say, I would say. Let's see. So JD said, are these albums like sessions for Capture One Pro? No, I think it would be wrong to make that analogy. It's simply, you can see here this collection that we made down here. Let's just remove JD's comment so it's not hiding up. You can see the collections down here. They're just albums like, you know, any other albums that I make. I can make another album and then target that as the capture collection. So if I was shooting a few different looks like fashion or portrait or different products, perhaps then you could make different albums, but they would always go into all captures. So you would see all of them in all captures and you would see all of them in all images. But if you wanted to separate up your captures differently, then you could do so. And of course, any of those capture albums you could also add to the cloud as well. Typically what I imagine you would do is go through you know, a set of pictures, add something like star ratings or color tags, and then once you've got to your filter collection, those would be the ones you would add to the cloud, or of course you can dump the whole lot to the cloud if you wish. Now, to disappoint you as well, JD, in terms of does it work with Phase 1 digital backs? Not currently on this release. And the reason for that is that manufacturers, Sony, Nikon, Canon, etc., they use a PTP transfer protocol to communicate with the camera. Phase 1 does not use PTP communication to communicate with the device. So unfortunately in iOS 15, there's not enough we can do on the USB side of things to communicate effectively with a Phase 1 camera. However, there's hope that that will change in iOS 16 and then we'd be able to do something. But as a Phase 1 owner, you have access to Cascable, which is an application which Phase 1 has collaborated with the Swedish company. But until iOS 16 arrives and we know a bit more about the USB potential, then it will be all the cameras that are supported by Capture One with the exception of Phase 1. Now, when I say that, you might be asking, well, why don't you release this tomorrow? There's a few things that we have to do first. One is testing, because some cameras, as always, behave a little bit differently to how we might expect. So we need to do a little bit of testing to make sure that everything is working nicely. There are a few oddities out there, and there's other things we need to do like localization for different languages and so on. So as much as we'd like to dump it on the App Store tomorrow, there's still a little bit of work to do in the background. Okay, let's just scroll back up a little bit and find some other questions. Could I remote control the camera when connected to an iPad? We can't currently from the iPad. I mean, there's nothing to stop me on this camera firing up the Sony app and then going via Bluetooth or something like that, but we can't currently. And that also goes with your question, Walter. Currently you have to release the shutter on the camera. There is potential that we can add some other things, but in terms of wanting to get this to market as quickly as possible, then that would cause an extra delay to have those kind of camera controls. So rather than delay it more than necessary, and considering a lot of you will operate the camera and shoot from the camera when using an iPad out in the field, it would be very easy to grab your iPad, mount it onto something, let's bring this up, like this. So this is just a tablet holder from Small Rig, couldn't read it backwards. With a tripod mount, you could easily bolt that onto the side of your tripod onto your tripod, and then you've got a really nice tethered, mobile, lightweight solution. This iPad is an iPad Pro, so connected via USBC, but I just saw one of my colleagues make a comment. Lightning ports do work, but you'll need a special Apple dongle to tether. So it is possible with a Lightning port, but you will need some additional hardware as well. Can we rate or color tag? Yeah, of course. So there's no different really. It's just, I see these are the pictures that I've I've taken, so I can do my rating color tagging, no problem whatsoever. And then of course we can filter down to our collection. Helps if I have something in that collection. So yeah, there's really no difference in that respect. You're just getting the photos onto the iPad straight away. Can I shoot to an external SSD over USB-C hub? No, not currently. Again, it's something that we've discussed and thought about, but right now it will be to the internal memory of the iPad. Now, all these things you're asking, it's not to say that, no, it's not possible. You know, lots of things are possible, but in the grand scheme of things, we have to consider what are the most needed requests, like tethering as an example. So tethering is obviously more important to get working than external storage as one example. Oh, will we open it up for beta testing? I don't know, Ray, actually. I'm not sure. It might not be necessary. If the testing comes through solid on our side, and then we know some of the obstacles we need to come over, there might not be a need for beta testing. But I guess if there would be a need, then we could, but otherwise not. Okay, oh, that's good to know, Matt. Great start for tethering. Redundancy of shooting to card would be a priority next step for me over camera controls. Interesting, so that's also good to know. I think camera controls would be nice, but as you say, Matt, maybe that would be a better one. Can I control my R5 from my phone and still be able to tether to my iPad? I don't know how the R5 connects to phone. If it's Wi-Fi, I don't know if that would interfere with the connection or Bluetooth, but that could be interesting. So I think test. When it's out and available, give it a try. Oh, Jens, there we go. Apple's camera adapter. Thanks, Jens. So if you're on a lightning connection, that's the piece of hardware you would need. On YouTube, we'll put up a poll shortly so you can vote, actually, out of interest, what your priority would be. Would that be camera controls? Would it be live view? Would it be redundancy? Or would it be something else? So if a poll pops up, then have a go at answering that. And that's on YouTube only. We can't quite manage to do it on YouTube and Facebook at the same time at the moment. Ty says, can we wirelessly tether? Possibly. That's also something which we've looked at. I can't promise anything, but it's also not something that's totally out of the question. But right now, cable connection is the one that makes sense. Alice, sorry, I just joined the meeting. Will the preview also work with huge file sizes? Well, as Alice, if you might have mixed earlier, this is a Sony A7R, so that's 60 megapixels. So that's 122 megabyte file size, and this is not compressed, and you can see the speed at which the pictures are coming in. So I don't really foresee a GFX 100 really being a struggle, to be honest. Certainly if you shoot in one of the compressed modes, file size is going to be a bit smaller, but when you look at the transfer rate of 60 megapixels, you know, it's under a second. So I don't think 100 megapixel is going to be too bad. Is the iPad screen calibrated? No, it is not. There is currently no way to calibrate an iPad screen. But to be honest, I wouldn't imagine anyone would do color critical final work on an iPad. Lots of us do deliver from an iPad, but if, Carlos, it sounds like calibration is something important for you, then I don't think anyone would then deliver critical files from an iPad screen. Let's see, how long is the cable possible? All you need to do is make sure you adhere to the standards for each connectivity type. So this is USB-C, which in theory, they recommend a maximum of 3.5 meters. You might get away with longer, but the safe bet is 3.5. If you're on USB, not C, USB-A, I suppose, then it's 4.5 meters. You might also be able to go longer, but again, I would very much stick to the safe amounts and see if you can risk it by going longer. Has there been any testing done on a USB 3 to USB-C dongle cable? Not personally, but it shouldn't make any difference, to be honest. So again, this is something you could also test yourself. Does Capture One support the XH2S? Yes, it does. Now I need an iPad with 8 terabyte for sure. Could be pretty easy to fill up the memory if you're not too careful. David, does Capture One realise there's no architectural photographers that are on location outside that want to useless and they own a P4 150 back? David, I don't know if you heard my explanation earlier, but Phase 1 cameras don't use the same protocol as Sony, Nikon, Fuji and so on, which is P2P. There's a limitation in iOS 15, which means we cannot communicate with the Phase 1 camera over USB yet. That might change, David, in iOS 16, but it's a current limitation of how the Phase 1 back communicates and a limitation of iOS 15. So once 16 comes along, then that's something we can look at. But right now, unfortunately, from a technical perspective, it's just not possible. Let's see. A link to Dropbox for over-air backup would be great for redundancy. Well, don't forget you can add to the cloud, but right now it's a manual push. So there's no auto sync into the cloud, but again, that could be something that might be interesting as well. When can we use this? That is the important question. So as I said, there's a few other jobs to be done. There's localization needed for different languages. We have to do more testing to make sure that everything is going to be okay for various different camera manufacturers as much as we can anticipate. So I'm going to say at some point in September at this point. So obviously, I'm sure you'd love us to dump this on the Apple Store right now, but there's still some testing that needs to be done, localization, submission to App Store, and so on. Don't be too disappointed, Ty. As I said, it's something we've looked at. Maybe you'll be able to see that in the future as well. Do we use the same license key on my Mac for the iPad release? No, Jean, it's a different subscription. So if you go on to the App Store and download Capture One for iPad, you can then try it out for free for 7 days. And then thereafter, it's a monthly charge, and that's based on your currency as well. So if you look in the App Store, that will tell you. Do we need a Tether Tools cable, or will any USB-C cable work? Any USB-C cable is probably a bit of a stretch. If you have some super cheap budget cable, I would be a bit skeptical. So I would obviously go for a decent cable like a Tether Tools cable, this one is, or Area 51, that's another good brand of high-performing cables. But I would not go cheap on the cable. Can we enable Capture One Live from the iPad while tethering? No, not currently. Again, that could be interesting in the future, but it's a case of priority. Like, would you prefer the redundancy first? Would you prefer layers? Is Capture One Live most important? And so on. So all of these balls we're juggling, you know, we have to prioritize. Okay, I think that's pretty much what we need to answer. Is this feature going to be at cost other than having Capture One already? No, it's if you own Capture One for iPad, then any new feature that we add is simply added. There's actually a couple of other small things going in here, I think. Previously, when you imported from Photos on the iPad, it was using Apple's own importer. Now we've switched it to our importer. And I think there's maybe one or two other minor things. But the next release that will get pushed to the App Store is generally all about tethering. Let's see. Can you transfer photos that have already been shot before camera and iPad are connected? Yeah, you can use your camera to import photos into Capture One for iPad, no problem at all. So if you set up your camera to work as a mass storage device, then it's simply like attaching a giant card reader to your iPad, and then you can import it as normal. Now there's nothing on this particular memory card in the camera, plus it's currently set up to have PC remote switched on. So the iPad won't see it as a hard drive or a memory card, it will see it as a camera. But there's no reason why you can't hook up your camera and import directly from it as well. So absolutely, we can do that. Any chance tethering could work for Ethernet cable that for cameras that support wired LAN transfer? I don't know, Carlos. If Wi-Fi tethered functionality is enabled, if it's anything like Capture One Pro on the desktop, then you kind of get Ethernet tethering by default. But I don't know personally if that's the same for the iPad, so I can't promise that at the moment. If I shoot JPEG and RAW, yes, you will get both. So you'll get the JPEG and the RAW. You can actually see the little handy RAW tag in the top right hand corner, but JPEG and RAW both will come through at the same time. Let's see, does the Apple importer change mean I'll see GFX previews at the import stage? That is a good question, Matt, actually. I don't know. I'll have to check. Because I know, yeah, if Apple doesn't support the RAW file, then it can't be seen. But that might also carry across on our importer as well. So I don't know. But that would be something for you to check as well. Okay. All right. Jason. Oh, I don't know, Jason. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm saying I don't know a lot. Your importer, does it allow for Apple's double tap to scroll to the top? Good question. It doesn't, but that's quite a nice usability thing. But you do have the fast swipe up the top as well. But that's also a nice UI thing. So good suggestion. Okay, so if I give you a little summary once more. Cameras supported are those supported by Capture One Pro, except for Phase 1 IQ backs for reasons mentioned. There's no camera control currently, so you can shoot from the camera, you can change your aperture, shutter speed, and so on. And then as soon as you capture, that will come straight through to Capture One, as you can see. Next, capture adjustments enabled by the button down here. All photos go into all images. All tethered captures go into all captures, and you can create a number of separate targeted capture albums as you wish if you want to separate out your day's shoot. Okay, so there we go. So sorry to tease you with that and tell you that you can't have it just yet, but we'll do our best to get through all that testing process as quickly as possible. So when it's in your hands, we know it's going to be working reliable and as you expect. Question from John, how do you set up the network? Is it smartphone or PC? PC, so you want to turn on PC remote essentially, and the connection would be over USB. It's a little bit tricky on the 7R4, it's kind of split over two menus, which is frustrating, but PC remote must be on, connection over USB, and that's it. Okay, so thank you for joining me on this short live stream. I hope you're excited about the future of this. I'm very happy that we could bring it to you much faster than anticipated. When we first thought about this, we didn't think it would be that soon. But thanks to some very talented developers in Copenhagen and in Athens, they've been able to pull this out the bag and bring it to you at the speed that you can see it. So congratulations to those men and women who've managed to bring this for us. Okay, so there'll be some live streams happening later on in August. I'm not around for a couple of weeks, but if you keep an eye on YouTube over the next week or so, you'll be able to see a program of new live events coming up for August and September. Whoops, there we go. Sorry, I just cut out for a second. And to make sure you're aware of when our events are coming, then the easiest thing for you to do is hit subscribe on our channel and the little bell as well. And that means you'll be notified whenever we go live on YouTube, post a new video, because quite a bit of new content has gone up recently as well. So do subscribe, and then you'll be able to keep up to date with everything that's happening, and also when we do stuff like this. So thanks again for joining, everybody, and hope to see you again on a future live stream. So take care and good night.